This is Akashvani. In the program Money Talk, now we bring you a discussion on government measures to contain food inflation. The participants are Jayanto Roy Chaudhary, economic analyst, and Rajesh Lake, anchor.
Tackling food inflation in India is a complex and multifaceted challenge that requires a combination of short-term and long-term strategies. To discuss this, we have in our studios Jayanto Roy Chaudhary, economic analyst. Jayanto, welcome to Akashvani.
Thank you.
Jayanto, there are a lot of factors that are the drivers of food inflation in India and in fact globally. Factors such as supply chain disruptions, weather-related issues, international market fluctuation and domestic production. So what are the factors which are particularly for global side that affect the economies and in particular in India?
Well, as you know that there have been disruptions in wheat and rice as well as in vegetable oils, mostly sunflower prices, sunflower oil and palm oil prices. So because of the Russia-Ukraine war, you have had issues as far as wheat production as well as supplies are concerned, as well as sunflower production and supply. On the other hand, Malaysia has been facing problems and palm oil availability across the globe have consequently been hit. So all these factors means that overall there has been an inflationary trend as far as food products are concerned globally. And that impacts us too. We are not immune from global pressures. So all these have been troubling us. And on top of that, we have had a patchy monsoon. We haven't had a bad monsoon, but a patchy monsoon, which means it's been uneven and it has not really rained at the right times. Now, all that has affected our own supplies of tomatoes and onions, two staples. So all this has contributed, but the good thing about it is this looks transitory as far as our domestic supplies are concerned. We find that procurement of wheat and rice has been reasonably good, rice especially, and hopefully there will be enough water in the reservoirs because despite the fact that rains have been late or have been patchy, the rivers are now looking more or less full, which means the dam reservoirs will be full, which is what we really need for the winter crop. So all these factors look as if it's going to be transitory. But as you know, the Reserve Bank of India has also said, let's wait and watch. So this wait and watch thing will continue. But overall, I think we are not going to be as badly hit as the rest of the world. The FAO Food Price Index has shown an uptick in July, as has our own CPI, which has been 7.4%. But going ahead, I think things are going to improve a little.
And what are the steps that the government have taken to control food inflation?
Well, as you know, the government has already imposed a 40% tax on export of onions, which is hitting our traditional markets, which include Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, many African countries, the Middle East itself. I mean, there have been articles in the Middle Eastern press complaining that India's tax is going to hit food prices in the Middle East. But we have had to do it. There was no other way out. NAFED and NACF has been procuring tomatoes and now onions from various mandis, and they have been selling at a subsidized rate. In order to cool down prices, we have been trying to build up a buffer stock of pulses. Tur, urad, moong, masoor, as well as an onion buffer is being built up with calibrated release of stocks to ensure that there is availability and prices do cool down. And it does look like prices are coming down somewhat. There is a downtrend. As yet, it is not a very great downtrend, but it is happening. And that should be able to help us out. Also, the credit policy, if you remember, which the RBI announced a few days back, that had a number of measures which restricted credit to people who traditionally use these kind of situations to hoard various kinds of food products and raise their prices. So that again will be of great help. The Essential Commodities Act is always there, and I believe it is being really implemented this time round to see to it that there is no hoarding. There is also the Bharat Dal initiative, which the government had started. It introduced this mechanism to convert chana stock into chana dal for retail disposal. So we are seeing this also is helping keep in check the pulses inflation.
So what about the price volatility? How can that be managed?
So that is why we have been doing this, buying up stocks of various kinds of tubers, including onions, ginger, etc., and releasing it in a calibrated fashion. That is actually the only way out that you have, besides controlling your hoarding and, of course, importing if you can. But importing is something which is not always feasible. The kind of lentils that we eat are not really produced by too many countries. Burma is one of the few, Myanmar that is, Canada is another. But Canada has been experiencing a dry spell of late. You know about the forest fires that Canada has been combating. So that has impacted its own agriculture. Wheat prices are partly increased not only because of the Russian-Ukrainian war, but also because of the dry spell in Canada. So these things are not something which you can really solve by imports. And India is such a big buyer. When it starts buying, it actually raises prices globally. So imports are not really the long-term or even the medium-term way out for us. The way out for us really is to kind of see to it that we do produce much more of the given commodity, and also not only produce enough to be able to feed our own people, but to be able to supply to our buyers, our traditional buyers, because we have a duty towards them. If we can't sell those products at the right rate to them, their economies also suffer, their people also suffer.
Yeah, today Mr. Goyal has said and assured the farmers that the price rise will not take place. Today he has gone ahead and communicated to the farmers that no matter what, price rise will not go further. So what do you think? What are the assurances that the government can give, and how can the supply chain inefficiencies be addressed?
Well, as you know, that the one big problem that we have always had is the middlemen that we have in the agricultural sector. They eat up a lot of the profits that the farmers would have been making. If the price of onion goes up, it's gone up to 50 rupees a kilo in the retail market. It hasn't really gone up significantly for the farmers. They are not getting any great prices. It is really the middlemen who are profiting most of the excess money. So that is where government has been trying to step in with these direct buying by NAFED and NCCF, etc. We have to, of course, there is a long-standing move to get rid of the mandi system, to see to it that the farmers are able to sell directly to the retailers. Those are longer-term measures, but we will have to implement it. We will have to see to it that these supply chain inefficiencies, as you described it, are addressed, and we are able to negotiate a new system whereby farmers are able to sell directly, or at least partially directly, so that the ultimate consumer is able to benefit and the farmer is able to benefit. If the price is, say, 40 rupees at the retail market, then the farmer should be getting at least 25, if not 30 rupees. It should not be more than 10 rupees margins for wholesalers, retailers, as well as for the cold storage and trucking segment. If it is more than 1/4 of the price, then it is extreme inefficiency. Even 1/4 of the price is not really a very efficient pricing mechanism. But in the interim, even a 1/4 margin for all these other people who are between the farmer and the retail and the ultimate consumer is good enough. But we have to ensure that at least is maintained. If we are unable to maintain that, then the farmer loses and the consumer also loses at the same time.
So since we're talking about the farmers, what about the policies that can be enacted to support smallholder farmers? They face a lot of challenges in accessing credit, modern farming techniques and markets. So what policies implemented?
Yeah, Rajesh, we have been trying to address that since the 1960s when the cooperative movement really started off in earnest. But somehow or the other, the cooperative movement hasn't really succeeded. The way out is either to cooperatize, you bring in more stronger, bigger cooperatives where the farmers are able to access credit, supply chain efficiencies, as well as modern retailing techniques, possibly run their own retailing outfits. Farmers' markets abroad are pretty popular. Or we go in for corporatization of farms, which is another way out when the farmers lease out their land to big, large corporates and they end up as rentiers. Whether that will succeed in India, given the fragmentation of land holdings, given the fact that the rents which will be available to the families which rent out will be actually not that great, is of course something which economists and agroeconomists will have to study. But that is also one way out. These are the two alternative models that we have right at this point of time. I'm sure people will be working on other alternative models, but these are the possibilities right at this current juncture.
Yeah. Jayanta, what about improving the agricultural productivity through modern farming or better techniques, etc., so that this can boost food production and help mitigate inflationary pressures?
Well, Rajesh, we have been trying to do that for quite a long time. Since the agricultural revolution has happened, there was, of course, a kind of ceiling had been reached as far as production in the northwestern part of India, the so-called green belt where Punjab, Haryana and Western UP was concerned. But I think that is being breached now by new agricultural research. But the problem is not the research that we are doing. We are bringing out new kind of seeds, new kind of techniques. But the problem is that they are all very water intensive crop production methodology. So we have to work out methodology which is less water intensive. Groundwater levels are, as you know, going down further. And at the same time, rainfall patterns have changed. Climate change has set in India. And we are witnessing, very funny kind of rainfall where there is enough rainfall, but yet it is patchy, it is scanty at places, and it happens at the wrong times. So we have to have shorter yielding seeds which grow, they plant much faster than they used to earlier, that require less water. And we have to have different kinds of irrigation techniques, which is where drip irrigation comes in a big way. All these will have to be worked out in tandem. And the biggest, of course, challenge is not only do you have to create these new techniques and new seeds, you have to transfer them into the fields. That lab to field movement, which was strong at some time, has weakened in the years in between, has to be revived, has to be strengthened so that our farmers get the benefit of the latest research that we are doing in places like Pusa, in places like Govind Ballabh Pant Institute, etc., where it's really path-breaking research is happening right now.
So, Jayanta,
Yes.
also the over-reliance on a few staple crops can make the food supply vulnerable to shocks. So, encouraging diversification into crops that are suited to local conditions and have good market demand can help reduce the impact of supply disruptions.
Yes, indeed, which is why the government under the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has launched this millet mission, which is a very good move because these are crops which were dying out, which were otherwise very healthy crops. And of course, the other kind of crops which are commanding a huge premium at this point of time. So revival of these kind of millets is indeed a very good step. Let's see how far it goes and how long it takes really to revive it. But they are very, very, very essential steps which we needed to take. Over-reliance on wheat and rice and certain kinds of rice has been a bane as far as our supply chain is concerned. We have to diversify, even in terms of rice, we have to diversify into more varieties of rice. You remember that most of India is actually rice eating and not grain eating. That is another thing we have to understand. So therefore, the amount of research into rice, indigenous rice varieties, which were already existent and quite strong, localized rice varieties, which have to be re-encouraged, those things have to be done. And they are, I am sure, being done at this point of time. We will see, but it takes time. These are moves which do not happen overnight. You cannot just snap your finger and get new kinds of millet crops, larger millet crops, or different kinds of rices. But that is happening, and I'm sure our markets are benefiting from them.
And what about careful management of import and export policies? How important is that?
That is extremely important. Of course, as I said, in terms of import, India is an elephant in the commodities market. Any move by us to import raises prices globally, but at the same time, we do need to import at times. So we have to have a calibrated move which allows us to import whenever we need to. In fact, we should have the option to import. There should be no bans on imports. There should be floor prices. There can be import taxes, which would reduce the kind of imports that we do in order to protect our own growers. The other point is that when you are talking about exports, knee-jerk reactions, increase in export taxes, increase in floor prices affect the availability of our products in the export market. Once you lose out, then it becomes very difficult to get back that position in the market because someone or the other will step in and will fill in the gap. If we stop exporting onions, for instance, then someone or the other who has surplus land but lot less, manpower will step in, have mechanized onion growing, new kinds of seeds, and they will capture our market. So we have to ensure a certain amount of our production for the exports. You have to kind of walk the rope, so to say, very, very delicately so as not to disturb your own market and at the same time not to disturb your export market.
Jayanta, on that very innovative suggestion given by you, we would have to wind up now. Thank you for being with Akashvani.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on government measures to contain food inflation. The participants were Jayanta Roy Chaudhary, economic analyst, and Rajesh Lake, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsttalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 92890 94044.